This video is going to introduce you to the concept of returning. So to get started, let's look at an example from geometry. I'd like to find the area of the circle. And so to do that, you need to know what the radius is, and in this problem, the radius is 5 inches. So going back to Dr. Java, I think we should make a block for that. So I'll start with our regular block commands. A good name for this method is probably circle area. And in the parameter list, the list of inputs that this method needs, we only need one integer variable, the radius, that represents the circle. To calculate the area of the circle, we're going to need a variable, which I think area is a good name for it, of type double. And we're going to take pi, the mathematical constant, times the radius squared, which I could also have done by math.pow, but I'm choosing not to. And to display my answer, I do a print statement. And then to test my method, I could call this circle area method from main, making sure I put in the input that I need. In this case, that's 5, which will be copied into radius. And when I compile it and run it, I get the answer of about 78.53, which seems like a reasonable answer for the area of that circle. To look at another interesting situation, which is going to lead to the concept of returning, let's look at a cylinder. To find the volume of a cylinder, you need to find the area of the base, which happens to be a circle, and multiply it by the height. That isn't going to be so bad because we already know how to find the area of a circle. And so let's go ahead and make ourselves another block. So public static void cylinder volume. This time we're going to need two parameters. One, a radius, and the other, the height. One quick thing to notice is both of these methods now, or blocks, have a variable radius. It's a little bit weird, but it's going to be okay that they both have that variable. They don't conflict in any way that they have their own radius variable. Alright, so to find the volume of a cylinder, we're going to have to find the area of the cylinder first, or of the base first. And fortunately, we have a method called circle area, so we should call that. And we should put in the radius of the cylinder, which is denoted by this variable, which will then go into this variable radius. Interesting. And then we'll calculate the area and print it out. Now, what becomes interesting is, okay, so once I calculate the area, I need to take that area, multiply it by the height. And so the question is, well, how do I do that? How do I access the area that I just utilized from the circle area method? Because right now, if I run cylinder volume and I put in the radius, which, if I remember from the picture, it's not 3,400, it's 1,700 because you have to divide by 2 for the radius. And I put in the height, and the height was 1,800. And I compile and run this. It will display the fact that the area of the base is very large, this large number, but now I need to multiply that by the height. And it's like, well, how do I do that? Because that's what's being printed. Instead of, it's not like a number in my program that I can do anything with. So one idea is that maybe I could do this. Volume equals area times height. Because area was the variable in the circle area method that held the value of the area of the circle. So if I took that value and multiplied it by the height, well, that should give me the volume, and then all I'd have to do is print that out. So if I compile and run, oh no, errors everywhere. So it's telling me here, if I read this, that it cannot find a symbol. That symbol is the variable area. And the problem is, this variable area is only in the circle area method. That's its scope. It only lives there. So you're not allowed to use it in other blocks, like this block down here. So that's a bummer. But it leads us to a good solution that we're going to use in a lot of our blocks, which is that we don't want all our blocks to print values. Sometimes we just want them to do a calculation that the rest of our program could then access. To do that, we are going to indicate an output value for our method. And the way we do that is we write the word return, followed by the data that we'd like to return. So area is the variable that holds the value that the circle calculated. So then we are going to return, or say our output is to our method, this variable area. There is a whole slew of things that now has to change once we make this return. The first is, up here where it says void, it can no longer say void. It has to say something else. It has to say the word double. The reason why is that this value that the method is returning, or saying as its output, is a decimal value. And this here indicates that the method is returning a double value, returning a decimal value. Now when we go back to the cylinder volume method, here I'm calling the method, and when it's called, there is going to be a result, or something that's returned. So here, I'm going to have to make a variable double, I'm going to call this base area, and assign it to the result of calling the circle area function, or method. Since now this variable is called base area, I can use base area times height, multiply it by the base area times the height to calculate the volume, then I can print my answer. Let's see if all that worked out. I'm going to compile it, no errors, and then I'm going to run it, and it gives me a very large value. This is 1.63 times 10 to the 10th. Big area, but remember this was in millimeter, or big volume, it's in millimeters cubed. All right, so let's walk through how this worked again. I'm calling the cylinder volume method with two inputs. These two numbers get copied into the radius and height variables. Then I call the circle area method, which copies in the radius, which was 1700, to this radius variable, and then it does a calculation to get the area. This method then says, hey, I've got a number that I'm going to send back to the place that called me, and that will then get stored into this variable base area. We use that variable with another parameter, height, to figure out the volume, and then we printed it out. Make sure that anytime you have a method that has some value that's being returned, that you write the word double or int to indicate what type of value is being sent back. So this works pretty well. I think also, though, we want the cylinder volume method to return a value instead of printing it out, because maybe we would like to use the cylinder volume to do something else, to do another calculation, another geometry problem. So instead of printing the volume, it's probably better to have it return the volume, and then to change the return type here to be a decimal type. Now what's interesting is if I compile and run it, you will see nothing. And the reason why is that my program no longer has a print statement. It just did a calculation. So now, to make this program kind of be in its final form, it makes the most sense, I think, to say double cylvol, little variable here, equal to the call to the cylinder volume method, and then to print out that the cylinder volume is whatever it is. And if we compile and run it, this time it gives us the answer with a nice little message. So this is a very accurate description of what our methods are going to be doing for the most part going forward. A lot of the times they're going to take some inputs, they're going to do a calculation, they may even call other methods, and then finally they're going to return a value. Most of our methods will have a word here instead of void. So one last thing to point out here is that a method that has a return statement in it will have a not the word void. It'll say public static and then a type. Methods that don't have a return in them will say public static void. And what void essentially means is that it doesn't return a value. It just does a bunch of commands, and then when it's done, it stops. A method that has a type here, like double or int or some other type, it's saying that once it gets a calculation, the answer that it calculates, it's going to send to another part of the program, and then that other part of the program will be using that value. So that's the idea behind returning values. Hopefully this made some sense.